Hello to all of our listeners out there in podcast land, and welcome to episode 34 of Canadian Patriot Podcast, recorded on July 18th, 2016. Joining me this evening, we have Marty, a sport shooter and hunter from Southern Ontario. Hey, Marty, how's it going?
All right, yourself?
Good, thank you. We also have Gavin. Gavin's a business owner, gun enthusiast, hunter, atheist, and the host of the Greater Toronto. And the host. Fuck's sakes, I can't fucking.
One of these times you'll make it through the intro.
One of them. But yes, hello Andrew, how are you? I am doing well.
No, I'm doing that again. Give me like a second so I can find a spot to cut it. Fuck it. Fix it in post.
To give him some dead air.
Gavin, a business owner, gun and...
Just cut it in from one of the earlier episodes.
Why are we doing this?
Because sometimes it changes, and sometimes people are new, and sometimes it's just because I want to. Gavin, a business owner, gun enthusiast, hunter, atheist, and the host of the Greater Toronto Area chapter of the Tactical Beard Owners Club. Hey, Gavin, how you doing?
Pretty good. Thanks for having me, as per usual.
Well, I'm glad that you could make it and that you were on time, and someday I will learn how to read the intro. Since your bio says that you're the Toronto chapter host for the Tactical Beard Owners Club, would you like to tell everyone about your experience in Utah?
Yes, I was down there to meet up with some fellow members to do a long-range shoot/drinking/hangout weekend in the deserts of Utah. It was amazing. It was put on by a fellow brother, Jeff, from Utah Tactical Coaching. So for any of our American listeners, if you're looking to learn how to do long-range shooting or do your concealed carry permits or any of that stuff, check those guys out. It's well worth the time and money to get out there. Jeff is a Jedi master when it comes to reading wind and everything else. But with his spotting abilities, I was able to get out to 1,300 yards or 1.18 kilometers. So that was a lot of fun, and it was great to see some old friends and make some new ones and all that fun stuff. So,
Did you go to Utah just for the course, or did you have work out there?
just for that actually, and it wasn't even a course.
Awesome.
It was just to go and hang out with these guys. We luckily did not need to pay anything for it, and Jeff was kind enough to spot for us all day. And he is, like I said, literally a Jedi master. I mean, he was calling out windage sort of off the top of his head, and he was bang on every time. You know, in different.
You brought your 338?
Yeah, I brought my 338, so I hit it with that, and then I also with the 308, which was a little bit more challenging. But every time, like anyone would bring up their gun, and different calibers and everything else, different ammo, and he was bang on every single time. It was unreal.
Yeah, it's a wizardry, those guys that can do that.
Oh yeah, I mean, unbelievable. I mean, super fast too. Yeah, great time, and now I've got another skill in the toolbox, if you will.
I will. As always, I'm your host, Andrew. I'm a libertarian competitive shooter, gear reviewer at everydaytactical.com, and a firearms instructor. Now Gavin's going to read some copy.
Yeah, sorry, I was getting an email. Then we'd love to hear your feedback about the show. Please visit CanadianPatriotPodcast.com/feedback or email us at feedback@CanadianPatriotPodcast.com. And if you leave a 5-star review on iTunes, when you do that, leave in a little comment, and if you suggest that I drink something for the show, that might just happen. It has in the past. It likely will again.
All right, that brings us to what are we drinking? Gavin, we'll start with you.
Nothing crazy. I've got some Labatt Blue again this week.
Marty, what are you drinking?
Ryan Coke.
Right on. I've got Mill Street sampler pack, so I just have various Mill Street products.
Not bad, not bad. I do like their organic, but not because it's organic, just because it tastes good.
That's what I'm drinking right now is the organic lager. Later it'll be the stout, and then maybe the lemon tea, and I don't know. We'll see what else is in the fridge. I guess we talked about what Gavin has done. Marty, have you done anything cool lately?
No.
No? Did you finish your AR yet?
No, I got the last part in this week, so I just haven't actually wrenched it on yet. That's about it.
Right on. I want to thank everybody that was out at the CQB match number 4 at CFB Borden this past weekend, the 28 folks that came out to shoot with me, and the 20 of you that I beat. The other 7 of you, I will pay the stats person more next time. All right, I guess the main topic of the show we're going to do tonight is how to interact with law enforcement without getting shot.
Excellent topic.
It seems relevant based on current world events.
It seems surprisingly necessary.
Yeah.
It does seem surprisingly necessary, but we also live in a society where you have to print the contents of this cup are hot when you buy a coffee.
Well, people may assume that it's iced coffee, even though that's not what they ordered, and then spill it on themselves and burn themselves. I mean...
Yeah. So, a warning for people that are listening, how to interact with law enforcement. We've heard on the show before, and at length on the International Liberty or Death podcast where I've been a guest, about Tyler and Matt's run-in with the Brockville Police Department at the 6th Annual Canadian Podcaster Charity Shoot. I've had occasion to interact with law enforcement where they've pointed guns at me. Fortunately, that wasn't in Canada. It was, however, in the States, and I find that they are a little more trigger-happy in that jurisdiction. Have either of you had the opportunity to get yanked out of a vehicle at gunpoint by armed law enforcement?
No, I missed that privilege by about 20 minutes when I was in Brockville.
Yeah, likewise. I can't say I've had the pleasure.
Well, so far so good then. So we've got a list of ideas, and we'll go through and talk about what everybody thinks with your thoughts on how not to get shot by the cops. Step number 1 in my mind is don't flee. If they tell you to stop, or if you're driving a vehicle and you see the flashing lights behind you, it's probably best to not try and avoid the police. That seems to only encourage them to run after you.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Once you've stopped, I think that your best bet is to not make any sudden movements. That's another thing that seems to get people shot recently. And in the same vein, keeping your hands visible to the officers at all time. And I think there's a reason for this. So at one point, when I was significantly younger and in better shape, I had to do in-place security and actually do like checkpoint operations. And it turns out that when you have armed individuals at a checkpoint and you have drivers like driving towards them, they get really nervous when you do stupid things with your automobile or when they can't see what you're doing inside of your automobile. So in order to combat this, I would strongly encourage that if you have an interaction with a law enforcement officer, that whatever you're doing, you don't move unless they tell you to, and that you may want to reinforce the action that you're about to take. So if they tell you to produce your ID, for example, I'm going to reach in my glove box now and get my wallet. Is that okay? And wait for them to agree that it's okay. It's one of those things that if they know what you're doing and you know what you're doing and everybody's clear about what's about to happen, they don't get concerned when you start doing things sort of without being asked. Less likely to get speed holes as a result.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, I would say in Canada we're lucky in that. I mean, obviously, people just like pulling guns and shooting cops as they get pulled over is a lot less frequent. So the cops here are not as, say, jumpy or as aggressive as in the U.S. In my experience, but that still means that we do need to, use some caution. And like you said, I mean, when you get pulled over, just pull over. Keep your hands where you can see them. Don't make sudden movements. Be polite. And yeah, I keep my papers in my glove box, so when I get pulled over, they want to see them. I do the same thing. I say, okay, I need to reach into my glove box and get them, and then you wait for them to answer before you start making that movement. And if at
Yeah,
all
it tends to make.
possible, yeah, and if all possible, like while they're still pulling you over because they kind of stop you, and then it usually takes them a minute or two to get up to the car. If you can get all that stuff together beforehand, it's even better.
Yeah, I
If
think all,
it's
all these come down to do what the guy with the gun tells you to do.
Yes.
Yeah, which really, at the end of the day, would reduce a lot of, I think, police-involved shootings if the people that the police were interacting with would just do as they're told.
Yeah.
Stop
And
resisting.
I understand, even if you think you're in the right and he has no reason to be bothering you and shit like that, comply. You can sue him later if you really are upset about it, but
Well,
leave
yeah,
the
exactly.
situation without any speed holes.
Well, yeah, that's the thing, right? Like, as soon as you show any sign of resistance, force, being difficult, they basically are authorized then to deal with that. So,
I'm not
it could
saying,
be.
I'm not saying waive your rights or anything like that.
No,
Like,
no, no.
you have the
Yeah,
right to refuse search and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, don't get physical, don't resist,
but yeah. Don't be a
and
dick about it. And if
exactly.
and if they keep insisting, I mean, don't agree to it, but let them do it, and then you can sue the shit out of them later. For illegal search or anything else, right? Like, but the minute you make it physical or start being, belligerent or aggressive or anything like that, then they
Yeah,
can,
you run the risk of not walking away from that situation.
yeah, or they become justified in the things that they do. You may not get shot, but you may get punched and or arrested for just being a dick.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
You know what a great way to get a cop to taser you is? To do anything like that the cop considers assault. It's also a really good way to get shot. So any sort of
Yeah,
like escalation of force like that, the guy that carries the firearm professionally is more likely to win.
yeah,
Right? So just not giving them that opportunity to involve on. Wow, our YouTube comments are strange tonight. Not giving the opportunity to have to escalate to any level of force, and then sort of there's no reason for them to have a gun out of a holster, where it can end up in a place where it can negligently be discharged or on purpose discharged. Nobody ends up with any extra holes in them.
yeah. And I mean, like I said, I mean, I do think that here we do have it a little bit easier because I've never had a cop come up to my car window with his hand on his gun, with the strap unbuttoned. But I mean, that's commonplace in the U.S. And as some of our listeners probably travel to the U.S. or from there, it's kind of important to talk about it, I think, because I've been pulled over in the U.S. and especially when they've got two guys, because that's the worst, where you've got the one guy coming up to your front door. There's always that second guy coming up to the rear passenger door, both of them with their hands on their gun.
And
Yeah,
and
I've
that
had.
just in terms of you are talking about in Canada, it's a little bit less strict in that.
Hmm.
That being said, if you're a firearms owner and they run your plates, they know you're a firearms owner,
Oh yeah.
and that is going to make them cautious about the potential of firearms when they
Yep.
approach your vehicle.
Oh,
So as
definitely.
firearms, I think as a firearms owner, you have to be even that extra bit more cautious.
Yeah, no, I agree 100% on that because I've had that where I've been pulled over and then they run everything and then I've been sitting there and then like the radio. This is back when they had the gun registry, so I'd be sitting there and you hear over the radio, yeah, no, he's got this, 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 and then the cops kind of looking at me like, why do you have so many guns? And then it's well, now that you know that you've heard this and everything is like, so do you have any of those on you? And I mean, at the time, I didn't. Um, but I'm sure if I did, that would have made the situation maybe a little bit more tense. But yeah, luckily, no, I did not have any of those on me at the time.
Yeah, so anecdote time, because I've actually been removed from my vehicle while transporting legally owned firearms in Ontario by the OPP.
Yeah, there we go.
So,
That sounds like a good story.
anecdote time, yeah. So I was driving to a match for a weekend, and I had numerous firearms in my vehicle, both restricted and non-restricted. And I drove through some little sleepy town in the middle of like central Ontario, like north of Toronto, but not like still like not like northern Ontario, like up to 400 a ways. And it was like one stoplight kind of a town. And I, go through town, and a cop pulls out of a parking lot behind me after I went through an intersection, and it's about 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. Like, it's very early on a Saturday. It's like, okay, this is exciting. And I think we might have traveled 100 meters before the lights came on. It's like, cool. This ought to be a fun experience. Pull over. Wants to know where I'm going and everything. Wants to know, as soon as I tell him I'm going to a shooting match, wants to know about the guns. Proceeds to remove me from the vehicle. Hand on the weapon. Weapon didn't come out. Whatever the OPP gets issued, some kind of a Glock maybe. Has me sit on the sidewalk behind his cruiser. Pulls all the stuff out of the trunk of my car, and proceeds to ask me for all the combinations to all the combo locks to uncase everything, to check it against my documentation.
That seems a little excessive.
Well, everything was locked up, and he wanted to make sure it was all legal and registered and everything, so he was checking my paperwork that was in my range bag against the serial numbers that were on the firearms that I had, and the long gun registry was in effect at the time, so they were, like, double-checking all my non-restricteds as well as my restricteds. And he finally got to the point where he really didn't know what to do anymore, because, like, he couldn't find anything that was, like, an offense.
Yeah.
He was confused. Yeah. He was clearly confused about a lot of things, because it was definitely a younger guy that was, like, new on the job.
I was going to say, sounds like newbie got his first firearms interaction.
Yeah. So he actually ended up calling, like, a district supervisor. And again, it's the middle of nowhere, like, in central Ontario. So, like, after a 45-minute wait for a sergeant to show up, the sergeant comes over. He's like, "Do you know what you were pulled over for?" I'm like, "No." "How long have you been sitting on the side of the road?" "I don't know, about an hour," something like that. He goes, "We know everything is legal. We've run your name. We know you're a licensed gun owner. Everything's come back as being yours. You can pack your stuff up and go on about your business."
Yeah.
And they like just drove away and left all my guns uncased on the side of the road. So, like, 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, in the middle of this small town, like, in a commercial area, like, there's, like, a coffee shop that's not open yet, and, like, a pizza, and a couple other little stores, and I'm, like, in their parking lot, and I have, several firearms, AR-15s and handguns included, laying on the ground, and I'm just, like, casually putting things back in the case, trying to, like, not draw any more attention to myself.
Well, at least you didn't have, like, another cop, like, drive by, like, 45 seconds later after they left and be like...
Well, and that was the part that was like, okay, so these guys are just going to let me pack my stuff up, and, like, as I'm packing stuff up, they just drove away.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing seems to me like, obviously, you did the right thing, and you told the guy and everything, and you weren't hiding anything. But you think, like, once it comes back that, you've got all your paperwork, especially if they're not looking for, like, an armed robbery or something in the neighborhood using something like that, they would have just let you go?
No, that was the thing. Like, this guy, I guess, my perspective of the situation is the officer that pulled me over thought it was suspicious that I was driving my vehicle through this little small town really early in the morning with no other traffic, and I was, like, obeying speed limits and stop signs and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, like, like in Tyler's instance, it made sense for them to pull everything out of the car and check everything because theirs was a report of somebody, showing a gun. So that makes sense. But yeah, in your instance, that makes zero sense that they would... Yeah. Like, I get getting you out of the car and away from them as a safety precaution.
Yeah, which I could totally understand, because, like... Yeah. And it really doesn't matter, because I expect that any cop that comes up to my vehicle, at least in Ontario, where they have the CPIC system and they run the plate...
Yeah.
I fully expect that somebody's going to come up and eventually somebody's going to point a gun at me because they don't understand, like, legal firearms.
Yeah.
Like, it's just sort of a given as a firearms owner that, like, the average police officer doesn't know the firearms laws because it's not something they deal with on a regular basis, right? Like, they know the Highway Safety Act because it's something they enforce, like, all day, every day.
But even then, they don't know it that well sometimes.
Well, some of them know, but I mean, like, it's something that generally the police interact with, like, traffic enforcement all the time, so they know most of the rules, right? When it comes to firearms, they don't, so it's easier to just, okay, they want me to get out of the vehicle. All right. I'm going to reach down and unbuckle my seatbelt with my left hand. Is that okay? Yes. Okay, great. I'm going to use my left hand to open the door now. Is that okay? Yeah. Okay. And like, I've been pulled over in Guelph for something because I had a vehicle. I was told the story after the fact. I've been pulled over in Guelph by Guelph PD because I was reported as being a dangerous driver by someone who was actually later arrested for drunk driving, I found out, because, good times. But when the Guelph PD guy came up and he like ran my plates and wanted to know where I was going and what my business in Guelph was and all this other, when he came back and like we finished the traffic stop, he's like, yeah, so just so you know, the reason that we pulled you over today is because somebody called and said you were driving erratically on a county highway. And I said, oh, let me guess. And I gave him a vehicle description. He goes, yeah, how did you know that was the guy? I said, because that was the guy behind me that was swerving the whole way. Oh. We'll be right back. So they went off and actually ended up arresting the guy that called to report that I was a dangerous driver because he had been driving erratically. So it looked to him, I guess, that I was the erratic one.
And you remain speed hole free, right?
And I remain speed hole free, but I think that
to get us back to topic.
The interaction with the police officer in that case was, same thing. He says, can I have your license and registration? I said, sure, my license is in my wallet in the back, like in my jacket in the back. Can I reach behind me and get it? He goes, sure. I said, my registration is in my glove box. Can I reach over and get it? Same thing. And he goes, yeah, sure, no problem. But when he comes back and we were talking about like the other person that was involved, the person that called the police on me for dangerous driving, he actually said, I really appreciate that you like asked before you did things because it makes us feel a lot safer doing our jobs that we know what you're about to do.
Yeah. Well, and it's just being polite too. I mean, I got pulled over in this instance years ago. I was on my way from Peterborough to Perth to pick up a friend and give them a ride back to Peterborough because we were all in school together and they had their ride bailed on them, and I was like, whatever, I've got nothing to do, it's a nice day, so I was in my Jeep, dropped the top, opened the doors and cruised for a bit. On my way back I get pulled over for speeding, but he pulled me over and then he pulled the guy in front of me over as well. I was polite the whole time. The guy in front of me, however, apparently was being, a real dick. Comes back to me and, says, I'm going to let you go with a warning. But, the guy in front of me was, screaming at me, so, I'm going to give him a ticket. I'm like, well, that's how it goes. And then, the guy wished me well and sent me on my way, even picked a dead bird out of my grill. So even just being polite, can work in your favor. When you have done something wrong, because I was speeding at the time.
I think that's a big part of the civilian law enforcement interaction is like, if you're polite about things, because I mean, really, they're just trying to do their job, but most of their job is dealing with like the dregs of society.
Yeah, exactly.
Like people that don't want to interact with them, people that are yelling at them, or they get called to domestics, or they get called to some other like a noise complaint where somebody's being a jerk, right? So most of the time they spend dealing with people that don't want to deal with the police and don't interact with them, in a, we'll call it a cordial manner, a polite manner.
Yeah.
So just like not being a dick to them generally, like, because the average cop is not an asshole, right? Like, I'm sure there are cops just like in any profession that there are assholes, but I think the average cop is just a guy doing his job just like everybody else. For the most part, there are exceptions, naturally.
Yeah.
Right, so
far, the main summary is do what the guy with the gun tells you. Don't be a dick.
I think so. Don't be a dick.
Yeah.
Don't be a dick, I think, is a big thing.
Yeah, follow directions, and if you need to do something, tell them.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty straightforward. Unfortunately, like you said earlier, I mean, it's sad that it needs to be said, but
yeah,
I guess common sense isn't so common these days.
Yeah, like the fact that that this is a valid lesson to give to people. Don't be a dick.
Yeah, and I think
there's a lot of people that need to hear that.
I think it applies to many things in life, but in this particular episode, specifically when interacting with police, or even just general security people, like Not even just
You know what?
cops, but like
Let's just open
security
that up to
guards and-
general life lesson. Don't be a dick.
Yeah, that is a good takeaway. You heard it here first, listeners.
Yeah.
Don't be a dick.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I mean, I have a lot of friends that work just in general as security guards for concerts and, you know, apartment buildings and this and that and everything else. And I mean, they're kind of in that same boat as like, they only deal with you if you're being a dick. And then it's like, oh, well, you're sucking all the fun out of my night. Like, I came here to party and to rage and get out of control. And it's like, well, you doing that stops somebody else from having a fun night. So stop being a dick, and then security won't hassle you. And then you won't get kicked out of venues, you won't get arrested, you won't get shot, and all of that fun stuff, you know?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of specific points along with the general statement of don't be a dick that go along with interacting with law enforcement that I think if you haven't had the opportunity to work with law enforcement in a professional capacity or had, we'll say, numerous encounters with law enforcement, that maybe we should point out to people. Like not trying to make a joke of a situation because what your sense of humor is may vary significantly from the person that you're speaking with.
Yeah, definitely. Right? That's a really good one. Yeah.
Right, like don't try and make light of the situation. Like if you know what do you know why we pulled you over, sir? Well, haha, I was going a little fast. No, don't. That qualifies as being a dick. Don't do that.
Yeah.
They don't know you. They don't know when you're being sarcastic.
Yeah. I usually just go by the, well, I'm not really sure. Just so that way I'm not lying. I generally have an idea, but who knows?
Well, and that's
I'm not admitting to anything.
Yeah.
And that's actually another point that I wanted to bring up on our list of like considerations to not get ventilated by a police officer is don't talk. Like don't say things that you don't need to say. Don't have a conversation with them. Like answer their questions succinctly and directly. Don't be a dick about answering their questions, but like don't give extra information because you're not helping you.
Yeah, if it's not relevant, like, I mean, if you happen to have firearms in the car, I mean, maybe you should tell them, but don't just go, I have a gun. That's a bad idea. That is a really bad idea.
That's the wrong way of having that conversation. I agree.
Let's explore that, because there is a preferred, like, so in some states in the U.S., there is, like, a way that you are legally required to disclose to a police officer that you are legally carrying a firearm.
Well,
and there are other states where it's more like a good suggestion to do it a certain way. And generally in the states where you don't have to disclose that you're actually carrying a firearm legally, I think the preferred method is to hand over your CCW permit along with your driver's license.
Yes, because that is a less aggressive way of doing it, because you're not saying something that sounds like a threat. You're kind of handing it over, they look at it, and they come to the conclusion themselves. You are not using the word gun or weapon.
Yeah, which is one of those things that freak people out, and this goes back to not saying more than you need to say, because if you say gun to a cop, he hears gun, regardless of the rest of the context, right? Like, he may not understand the rest of the sentence. He fixates on, gun, firearm, weapon, etc.
Yeah, and from my experience crossing the border just this last weekend, I kind of had to correct the airport personnel because they kept going gun, and I'm like, can we not use that word? Like, just say firearm if you have to, but don't call it a gun, don't call it a weapon. I mean, we all know that's what it is, but like, if other people hear that, they're gonna freak out. I'm not doing anything illegal. I have all my paperwork.
Yeah.
Let's just use the term firearm.
Let's just get the sporting equipment onto the plane.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like, the lady just kept going gun, 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 gun. I'm like, can we stop saying that? Like, everyone around here is going to hear that, and they're going to get freaked out. And I don't want to freak everyone out.
Yeah. I mean, gun is almost as bad as saying bomb in an airport. It's like one of those words that you don't want other passengers to, like, randomly overhear one part of a conversation and focus on the wrong thing, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
So how would you guys deal with it if you got pulled over here and you're, like, legally transporting your, I don't know, say handgun to the range? How would you inform an officer of that, or would you inform an officer of that?
I would probably do something similar to the U.S. because my driver's license and my firearms license are in my wallet side by side. So I'd probably just hand them both over at the same time if I had one in the car with me.
So if I'm transporting a handgun, it's in it's in the double lock case and things like that in the back. I I wouldn't I wouldn't say anything. I would hand if he asked me, absolutely. And if he was going to search the vehicle, I would immediately I would say just so you're aware, it's there. But I wouldn't just forthright throw that information out there
Yeah,
just to
I agree
just
with
to,
Marty.
just to
This is
prevent
the
escalating the situation unnecessarily.
True.
I agree with Marty. This is the saying as little as you need to say thing. If they don't expressly ask if I have a firearm, I'm not
Yeah,
going to tell them I have a firearm because I don't want them to focus on the wrong thing.
true.
Yeah, if somebody comes up to the car, which I've had happen, and asks me, like, second question that they say is, do you have any weapons in the vehicle? Then you have to carefully frame how yes you do.
Yeah.
Yeah, same thing.
Actually,
Like I said,
sir,
and at the point, like if somehow like there's a reason why they're searching the vehicle, I would put that out there just so you're aware you're going to find a firearm. It's locked in the case and things like that. And same thing, it's just to prevent the escalation of the situation.
yeah, I agree with that. My go-to response, the times that I've been pulled over and somebody's asked if I've had a firearm or a weapon in the vehicle is, actually, I have a PAL, and you'll find my paperwork in my green backpack, and you'll find a double-locked case containing my firearms in, and give them a description of the case.
Yeah, that's a good way because you're giving them all the security measures you have in place before
Well,
you're
I give them
saying,
the security and the registration, and I leave the firearm to the very end of the conversation.
yeah, so you're de-escalating it leading
Right.
up to that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm proactively making sure that they have the right mindset. I have a license, and this is where you'll find my registration, and this is a description of where the firearm is stored.
Yeah.
And usually no one freaks out about that. I've had an exception to that, but usually no one freaks out about that because they're like, oh, well, he's got a firearms license. He probably knows what's going on.
Yeah. Well, and that was like when I went through customs today. I knew they were going to ask all this stuff, so I had all of my stuff ready to just hand them. I was like, here you go. Here's my ATF papers. Here's my gun license. Here's my passport. Here's that stupid form they make you fill out and everything else, all at once. Just here you go. I know you're going to ask for it all at once. Boom.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you guys want to clarify with, like, how to not get shot when interacting with law enforcement? I guess we've talked a lot about, like, traffic stops. Is there any other, like, law enforcement interaction stuff?
I've had cops come to my house because I've called them. A buddy of mine was a little intoxicated and fell and cracked his head open. And then the cops came to the house because I called 911, even though I told them I don't need police or fire, I just need medical. They usually just send everybody to make sure. And I had one airsoft magazine sitting out on the table that they kind of took exception to. And we're like, we know you're a gun owner. I'm like, well, that's obviously an airsoft magazine because of the valve on it. But again, magazines are not, there's no restriction on locking them up as long as it's not in the firearm or anything. It's okay. But everything is locked up and all of that. So, chill. But, yeah, you gotta just, like anything, just pull up, be a dick. It all boils down to, even when you get stopped, just walking somewhere, because I've had that happen when I was younger.
Yeah, I've had that.
I don't know. I've had police come to my house, a couple of times in the last several years for various reasons, and firearms have never even come up in the conversation. Really, they've really never bothered.
Oh, see, I've had police called to my residence expressly because of the firearms.
That you did.
That I did, yeah. Anecdote.
Was Tyler hanging out at your house by any chance?
No, Tyler was not hanging out at my house. I used to live in like a converted house that had like every level of the house was like an apartment, and I actually shared like a storage room, laundry room with another unit. and I had all of my ammunition stored there. No firearms or anything, and like the other tenant was cool with it. Like when she moved in, I said, "Hey, just so you know, I keep a bunch of ammo here. Is that going to be a problem for you?" No, no, it's fine. Whatever. No big deal, right? So she knew I had guns. She doesn't care. She did have a small child that was like wasn't allowed in the laundry room, but also because it was like a laundry room and he had no reason to be there, and like the ammunition was like no more dangerous than like the bleach was, right? Like it's just like the small child is not allowed to play there, right?
Yeah.
But we actually had the landlord had a maintenance person there fixing water pipes one day, and they ended up calling the police because they didn't understand why I needed a giant cache of ammunition.
What did you have,
Right,
like
so
300 rounds?
I had several thousand rounds of various assorted ammunition. Several thousand rounds. That like not counting the like 5,000 or 10,000 rounds of 22. So my neighbor that I shared the laundry room with, the other tenant, called me at work and was like, "Hey, just so you know, the police are here, and they'd like you to come home from work." Okay, that doesn't sound good. Yeah, they're here about all your guns. Yeah, I'll be there in a minute. So it turned out that the landlord or the maintenance person that worked for the landlord, what have you, had called because they saw all of my ammunition, which is like just a big like steel shelf full of ammo, right? Like they're surplus wood crates and ammo cans and like factory packaged like commercial ammo and all of my reloaded ammo and like all just ammo, right? Nothing significant. I think I might have had like some boxes of accessories, magazines, or holsters or something like that, right? But all the firearms were like locked in my locked unit in a safe, and everything was kosher there. And they showed up and they like went through everything, and they're like, "Yeah, so we understand that you probably know the laws and that all of this is legal, but FYI, you can't have it here." And we went through this whole rigmarole, and it turned out that the guy that was living with my upstairs neighbor had a weapons prohibition. So he wasn't allowed to have access to the laundry room where the ammo was stored.
Well, that's something he could have disclosed to you.
Yes. But it took like a 60-minute conversation with the police to get to that point, and the sum total of the conversation basically was, you have to move the ammo because he can't be in, like, he can't go into the room where the ammo is. So fine, no big deal, right?
Yeah. That's fair.
But like, yeah, but same thing, like showing up and being polite and like, the police that I were dealing with were a little standoffish because they clearly did not know the Firearms Act. Because the other thing was they wouldn't tell me why I had to move stuff, and like I eventually got to a point where I'm like, no, I'm just not going to move it. It's legal. You've already told me you're not going to charge me. You've already agreed with me that it's being stored legally. You don't want to see my gun safe, my registration. You know I have a firearms license. No. Like.
Yeah.
So eventually they finally were like, well, it's actually because of your neighbor. So I made them move all of the ammo, which was fine. It was fun for me. I enjoyed watching them do that.
Have I told you about the kind of along the same vein and a bit of a tangent, but have I told you about when I got the cops to drive all the cars and everything because we were wasted?
No, but that sounds amazing.
So we were all up at my high school girlfriend's family's pig roast in Penetanguishene, and they built a giant bonfire in sort of like the central commons area, and I mean they douse it in gasoline and then throw a road flare to light it. So when they did that, it kind of makes a large boom, and the ground shakes a little bit. But as the property is right on the water, that kind of echoed, I guess, across the bay. And somebody on the other side of the bay called the cops and goes, "I think a car just blew up." So
that's not a leap in logic at all. Okay.
So several hours later, the cops show up because it took them that long to find where the car blew up. And I mean, there's no regulation or anything that says you have to park on this side of the road or that side of the road. But you know, they come in and go, "Well, we couldn't get the truck down here, or the fire truck or the ambulance down here because there's cars on both sides of the road and blocking the road. So we need you guys to move all of them." We're like, "Well, you know, there's no law that says we can't park like this, and two, we're all drunk. So I can't move you can't ask me to do that." And they're like, fine, we'll move all the cars. So like everyone had to like go up and find a cop and be like, here are my keys. And then they had to like repark the cars all along one side of the road so that way they could get, the ambulance down if that evening there happened to be a legitimate call. So yeah, kind of along the same vein. Like,
that's pretty good. How was the interaction between a bunch of drunk people and the police, though?
it was pretty good. I mean, we were all like, are you serious? Like, and there was a bunch of off-duty cops and firefighters that were there hanging out with us. Like, we weren't doing anything wrong. We're not in an area where you need a permit for a bonfire. So everything was on the level. Yeah, it's good times.
All right. Anything else with the not getting shot by law enforcement? I put in the show notes the links to a bunch of recent shootings. I don't know if we necessarily want or need to talk about them because they all did happen in the U.S., but I thought they served as good examples of what not to do.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. We don't need to talk about those. Let's go into the news then.
Yep. But just to reiterate, the biggest thing, don't be a dick.
Yeah, takeaway from tonight's episode. When dealing with other people, particularly armed people that work for the state, don't be a dick. Why do I have an ad that I can't skip when I... Fuck the Atlantic. Anyway, the first piece of news tonight comes to us from the Atlantic. Enforcing the law is inherently violent. A Yale law professor suggests the oft-ignored truth should inform debates about what statutes and regulations to codify. In other news, the sky is blue and water is wet.
I did appreciate this article, though. I think there's a lot of people that don't realize kind of the simplicity of what this guy said.
Okay, Marty, you read it. Tell us about it.
Every law is backed by a gun. That's the simplicity of it. It doesn't matter if it's, you don't think people should be driving on this side of the road on a Sunday. That's backed by a gun. It's any from the simplest to the largest laws. And so if you're asking for a law to be in place, you're asking for that person to comply to your wishes at threat of a gun. And people should be taking that into consideration before they suggest, before they ask, and before they write laws into place.
That's a way better summary than this Yale wrote.
Yeah. I mean, I know I've referenced it in the show before, but there's a great article by a guy named Jack Donovan that talks all about violence being the gold standard, and he covers that like, everything is backed up by violence. Without that, there's no incentive to do anything. I mean, it's just government-sanctioned violence. I mean, it's... Yeah, exactly like you said. Like, I mean, anytime, like, oh, don't litter.
Yeah.
Okay, so if I do, what are you going to do? Oh, you're going to fine me. Okay, what if I don't pay the fine? Well, then you're going to send cops to my house to, talk to me. And eventually they'll have to come and arrest me if I stop paying the fine.
Yeah,
and if I don't... Yeah, and if I don't go peacefully, what are they going to do? They're going to punch me, kick me. If I keep fighting, eventually they're going to shoot me.
Yeah.
Like
if you try to resist them, confiscating your stuff for an act that you don't believe in, then they will shoot you eventually. That's that's what they're there. That's why they have the firearm.
Yeah.
Well, and that's every action of the state. We shouldn't just say that this applies to codified laws. Everything that any state does is backed up by people that work for the state to employ violence against the common citizenry.
Yep.
Right? Because at the end of the day, anything that your government wants to do for or against you is backed up by somebody that works under the authority of the state, like a police officer, that wields violence on the state's behalf against other people.
Yep. I love using that argument against people that are like, oh, well, eating meat is murder and the government should ban it. Say, okay, well, what if I don't stop eating meat? you're against violence and murder. I'm obviously not going to pay a fine for eating meat. I mean, they are going to literally have to come after me and commit violence against me to get me to stop eating meat. Is that okay? And then their kind of head just kind of explodes a little bit.
Yeah, it is fun to watch the progressive left's head explode anytime you bring up the idea that anytime there's a cry for there should be a law for, or there needs to be a rule, or the government should.
Yeah.
Really, should the government? Really?
Yeah.
Because what you're saying is that this act is so heinous that we have to have agents of the state come and employ violence against someone else.
Yep.
Is that really what you want? Because that's an awfully dangerous slope. What happens if it's something that you want and someone else thinks that there should be a law against it? Because you're still advocating the use of violence and force against someone else. Really?
Yeah.
Is that what we want?
And really, the government shouldn't tell you what you can or can't do.
No, I agree. Well, we've been over this. The government shouldn't have nearly as much authority as it has.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, let's go to something that's a little more local. It's not the Atlantic. It comes to us from the Toronto Star. And then the article is called "It's Time to Disarm the Police." Cole. I think Cole is the fellow that wrote it. Yeah, Desmond Cole wrote it, and this is from last year, but for some reason keeps popping up in my news feed on the Facebook. And I think it's because of we'll call it the tension currently going on in the United States.
Well, and I mean, and in Canada, I would say. I mean, it's just not as violent. I mean,
yeah, Black Lives Matter showing up to Pride Parade and having a sit-in, I don't think is the same as cops getting shot at in Dallas for being cops.
But
no, but it starts somewhere.
Yeah, and I mean,
no, I agree.
They did just
and I think that's
ask
why
them to not be in the parade in Vancouver as well.
That's true, and I think that's why this article keeps being brought back up, even though it is a year out of date.
Yeah, and I mean, it kind of ties into everything else we're talking about nicely this evening as well, I think.
I didn't hear this Vancouver thing. They asked the police not to be in it, or they asked BLM to not be in it?
The BLM has asked the police not to be allowed into the Pride Parade. And not the Bureau of Land Management, for anyone that's listening.
If you want to make an inclusive community, the first thing you should do is ban a subset of that community, right? That's
yeah. That's
I was hopeful you meant the other way around. I was like, oh, that's you know, after the shit they caused at Toronto, I'm not surprised they wanted them not to be there. But
yeah,
no,
I mean,
Black Lives Matter.
But it's the police.
All right, so shall we talk about this whole the militarization of police and the call to disarm them?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that, I mean, you could probably do a whole show on this topic alone, but I mean, I
think that's two separate topics. The militarization of police is one issue. Disarmament of police is an entirely different issue.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like, I don't think cops should be rolling around in, like, you know, plate carriers and armored vehicles with full auto, you know, M4s, you know, and stuff like that, like just doing regular traffic stops or like, hey, don't litter, and then like you go, what? And they blow you away. Like, that's the militarization of police. I don't agree with that.
Yeah. Small towns don't necessarily need armored vehicles and things like that.
But you know, I don't think that they maybe shouldn't not have that stuff. It should be, you know, if they need it, it's available. Like,
right, and exactly. At what point do you need it? Well, you need it when you need it. So in the example of, like, say, a plate carrier, you don't need a plate carrier with, like, level 4 plates, like, because the average cop is going to be wearing soft body armor in our country, right? Like level 2, level 3, maybe level 3. The average cop is going to be wearing level 2 body armor. They're going to have soft armor that's going to stop the majority of handgun rounds, right?
I remember when they didn't wear any at all.
This is. I mean, to me, it's relatively simple. Is they need to have the equipment to respond to what is reasonably expected in their job.
Agreed.
There's a reasonable expectation that they're going to come across people that are going to have rifles, they're going to have handguns. They're not going to come across people that have, they don't necessarily need like massive armored vehicles that can take, landmines and shit like that in city streets. They're not going to expect, large artillery fire and things like that. They need to be able to have what the equipment to handle what's reasonably expected for their job.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a problem with like every officer wearing, like soft body armor and then maybe keeping plates and a patrol carbine, because that's what police carry, in their trunk.
Agreed.
And or a shotgun.
See, I have a difference of opinion between the body armor and the firearms, because in my determination, as anyone who's not doing law enforcement, or anyone that is actually doing law enforcement, if you're not the individual officer, you shouldn't get to make the call about the defensive tools that are available to you. If you want to wear level 4 plates on the job, I am fully in support of that. I think that it looks like posturing, but if somebody's shooting at you with a rifle, having plates in the car doesn't do you any good.
No,
Rolling up on a scene where there's an active shooter and you can get your plates, okay, sure. That makes sense, but how many cops are going to get shot because they roll up and they're the first guy there?
Yeah, I mean, there is sort of a give and take on it.
So I have no problem with anyone having any level of body armor in this country. Police, military, law enforcement, civilian, it doesn't make a difference to me. If you want to rock level 4 plates all day, every day, go nuts. Like, I think it's excessive. Sorry, go ahead, Marty.
Where I'm going to go with it is that if we're considering that the role of the police is to de-escalate the situation, there is something to the intimidation factor of them like rolling in fully kitted out.
No, I agree with you, and that's what I'm saying. Like level 4, like hard armor plates look like posturing, but to the untrained civilian, which is the average civilian, like let's talk about the everyman.
You can also get
body armor looks like posturing.
You can get plate carriers that are not as aggressive looking. Right? Like if you get ones with like molly webbing on it and like, AR mag holders and like all of that, like that looks aggressive. But if you get something that's just like a slick front that looks very similar to soft body armor, I don't think anyone would even be able to tell the difference without knowing what's up.
Yeah, and I can see that, and I think that determination should be left to the individual officer. If your department mandates you must wear, at a minimum, level 2 soft armor, whether it's concealable or whether it's outside the shirt or what have you, then you have to do it. And I think that the average patrolman, if you want to, like, whether your department pays for it or not, if you want to rock level 4 plates in a slick carrier and you don't look like...
Yeah, I mean, there's uniform standards that need to be met. But then what you put inside that carrier is up to you, I think.
And I'm on board with that. The part where I have a distinction with that is I am all for them keeping that patrol carbine, the assault rifle, in their car, because it's not something they're going to need to like have slung while they're walking around doing like crowd control, right?
Yeah, and I mean...
but they should have access to it.
Agreed, and I mean, it might be unfortunate that the odd person here or there, in certain situations maybe gets surprised and could need it then, and it's not slung on them, but I would say that at least in Canada that's very rare.
Yeah, and the same thing though. I mean, like they could also randomly come across a grenade.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't. Again, there has to be, some sort of level of what are the odds of these type of thing happening type of thing.
Well, exactly, and that's why I have zero problem keeping it in their trunk, keeping a shotgun in their trunk, because those are tools that they may need in relatively normal use of their job. Yeah. Like other things they maybe should have access to.
I wouldn't say normal use, but it's reasonable that they could come across that type of situation.
Yeah, like I don't think every cop needs like a Remington 700 sniper rifle in their trunk. But, each police station should have access to that should they need it.
Yeah, I'm okay with like law enforcement having like the designated marksman sniper position. Having every car rolling around with a Rem 700 budgetarily doesn't make sense because not every cop's a shooter.
Yeah. But yeah,
right? But like,
a pistol and a carbine.
A pistol and a carbine or a pistol and a shotgun. I would actually prefer to see people had a pistol and a carbine over pistol shotgun because everybody shotgun has been the de facto police long arm for the better part of 80 years.
Or maybe like
shotguns are
every
an
other
effective tool.
Every other.
Officer discretion. Again, if you want to roll with an 870 and you want that pump action shotgun,
you
cool.
get to pick. You get to pick based on what you live in and do. Yeah.
So why do you prefer they have a carbine over a shotgun?
The AR-15 is a very precise instrument. I can put a lot of rounds in a specific target with very little to no collateral damage. The 870, on the other hand, because you're going to be rolling with, say, double-aught buckshot or slugs, is a much more violent weapon and a much less precise weapon.
Yeah.
You also have things like over-penetration, which is more common with a shotgun slug than a .223 round.
Yeah.
Right? Shotgun rounds, pistol rounds, tend to go through more drywall than .223 rounds do.
I was almost thinking shotgun for the opposite reason.
Well, it depends on your load in the shotgun, but who's rolling around with, like, birdshot? Birdshot will stop after 1 or 2 layers of drywall. Buckshot's going through several layers, right?
Like, you're talking about drywall, we're talking about kind of close quarters type of thing, so I think, a shotgun shooting from the hip or something like that, they can get on target a little easier, and there is not going to be over-penetration as much with the buckshot, whereas with the .223, you have to aim it more, and
but I mean,
and if they start flinging rounds because they panic, then that's rounds that are going all over the place.
But yeah, like I mean, your effective range on your pistol is what, 25 yards? I mean, I'm sure you could hit somebody.
Tops.
In a stress situation or police, I doubt they're hitting accurately at 25 yards.
Yeah, so I mean, anything inside of that is pistol. I mean, you could go with a shotgun. I mean, out to 50. But again, if you're in that,
not a good buckshot and open choke, really.
But and that's what there are appropriate tools, and there are,
and that's why, I don't have a problem with them carrying either or both. Yeah. If the money's there, both.
Well, absolutely. If the money is there, it is both. But I would prefer if you had the choice between one and the other as a department, that they went with the AR-15, just because it's a more precise tool. Yeah. The shotgun does have advantages. For example, beanbag rounds. That's not something an AR-15 can do.
Well, I'm sure they could come up with something. I mean, like they have those 22 shotgun rounds, right?
A key mod beanbag launcher.
Yeah. I mean, it'll be heavy as shit, but you can do it.
Cool,
yeah, you'd look cool.
Yeah.
But I mean, that also comes back to that posturing thing, right? So.
Yeah, but I think there's a big difference between this is what I roll with on my like day-to-day getup, and this is what I have access to.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, ideally, if it were up to me, every patrol car would be outfitted with the option for a pump-action shotgun and a semi-automatic carbine. That would be my choice. That way, you can deploy the tool that's appropriate to the situation.
Yep. Yeah, and then in certain larger cities where they may need other crazier stuff, they certainly have access to it. But it's the SWAT team or whatever they escalate to, when a bank robbery happens or a mass shooting or whatever happens, that they get that stuff. Well, but there needs to be some checks and balances, so they're not just rolling down Yonge Street and armored carriers with 50 cals.
So I was going to say, what additional equipment do you think you would need even in a city situation? Like, do you think these sort of armored personnel carriers and stuff like that, is that really necessary in an urban situation?
I don't know that it's necessary, and you get into this amazing argument of escalation of force because every time the police beef up their defensive or offensive capability, the criminals do the same thing, right? Yeah. So the cops start carrying, C7s, C8s, carbines, Colt Canada carbines, right? Well, okay, so now the drug dealers are carrying illegal semi-automatic or fully automatic rifles. Well, now the cops have to upgrade to the next level of body armor plus a better firearm to take on the criminals. So now the criminals are going to roll with body armor. Okay, so now we're going to have cops that are rolling around in MRAPs, right? The mine-resistant ambush protection vehicles, right? That's what all the American cities are getting, is all these used U.S. Army MRAPs. And we have similar things up here, like the Bearcat armored vehicle and the shit, they're made in Toronto and their name escapes me. The Bearcat, and what's the other one? Pterodyne, the Pterodyne Gurkha.
Yeah, but I mean,
but what's the? I mean, in your hypothetical analogy there, the criminals are always a step ahead. So
Yeah.
Well, and
what
that's
does it
what I was saying. So
matter?
if they start using MRAPs, then we're going to start having criminals that are going to start using IEDs.
Well, I
Yeah.
mean, you know,
All of this just results in more collateral damage to.
the bikers in Montreal already used rocket launchers, like in the 70s or the 80s, was it?
It was in the 80s, yeah.
Yeah. You
Yeah,
know, so I mean,
AT-4 rocket launchers.
Yeah.
so I mean, and that's what I'm saying. I mean, I don't think every police department should be issued a handful of, APCs or anything, but like some of the bigger ones where there is a credible threat that this may happen should have access to it, even if it's like, hey, Canadian Armed Forces base 10 minutes down the road, can we borrow this?
Yeah, I can see that. You get into an argument though with what do they really need, and where do you draw the line at like officer safety, officer protection? Because do you want
Yeah.
the officers to have the best tools for the job or not? Okay, well if you want them to have the best tools for the job, then they need an APC so they can't be killed when they are when they have
Yeah.
to roll up on a drug den, right? Like if they're going to a crack house to serve a warrant, you don't want them to get shot on entry, so they
Yeah.
have to have an APC. Like that's the argument that you get into. I'm
Yeah.
not saying they necessarily need the APC, but that's the argument, right? Like if you want them to have the best tools, that's what they need. Or conversely, you draw the line at officer safety somewhere, and then you get, well, you don't want that cops to like come home safely to their families.
Yeah. I mean,
People have
sometimes you
this
don't need it, and then sometimes you need a robot with a stick and some C4 taped to it.
I think the issue we're having here is that it's similar to what's what the government is looking at the situation is trying to come up with a sort of a blanket rule that they should have this or they shouldn't have this when all the different communities, all the different situations are different, and there is no, in the way our current system is structured, there is no way of just saying each individual department can get what they need without it affecting different budgets and things like that.
For sure. But I mean, I think based on population, not that that's necessarily a fair way of doing it, but that would be a somewhat reasonable, in my opinion, way of deciding the likelihood of certain things happening.
And I mean, I think you can look at crime stats to actually see that, because where are you going to see more people shooting at police officers? Are you going to see that in like Collingwood or Toronto?
Yeah. Like, I don't think terrorists are going to attack Collingwood. They might, but I don't think that it's very likely compared to, like Toronto or some of the other hubs.
Well, and that's
What
what I
if
say. And
ISIS is on a ski vacation?
ISIS don't ski. No
Sure
goats
they
there.
do. There are ski resorts in Dubai that they could practice at.
Yeah,
Indoor skiing, but still, it exists.
It's about as good as Blue Mountain, let's be honest.
Yeah.
It does become an interesting argument about where you draw the line with officer safety versus like the militarization aspect. And Marty did make a good point about like not every situation, like you can't plan for every situation and make a blanket statement that says everyone gets X.
And I think unfortunately I have to use an American example because that's sort of where this kind of stuff is happening. But during the whole Ferguson riots, like cops were issued, like Molly body armor and helmets and M4s and like the whole basically anything the military had, they had. And there's a big difference between, okay, we need the tools for the job to be safe because people are getting shot at, there are fire bombs going off and all kinds of stuff, and we need to contain the situation. But like they were rolling out like guns pointed. And I even saw like military advisors coming on and saying like, whoa, 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 like that is not how we roll unless there's an actual like threat in front of us. It's like
we're giving them the equipment without the training.
Guns at the ready, like so that you can pull it you need, but you don't walk down the street with it pointed at people that are not doing anything, because that's escalating the situation as opposed to de-escalating it. So I think
that's exactly what I was saying earlier about the whole like the posturing and the looking a certain way, right? Like you're making things worse just by your presence there because of the way that you appear.
Yeah, and I know, like for example, the Brits, when they sent the Black Watch over to Afghanistan and stuff like that, like they were rolling into some pretty dangerous neighborhoods, but they actively chose not to wear their helmets and wear their tam o' shanterns in order to sort of appear less threatening.
Yeah, I
Because
mean, like,
they're
it's
not
the same
wearing
example.
helmets. Yeah, they're not as threatening. They're not wearing their helmets, and it actually in my opinion in there is that it helped. It showed like, hey, if we're willing to walk around with no ballistic helmet on, how dangerous can the area be? And then that kind of helped bring everything back down again.
So how much of the militarization of police force do you think is a result of them relying on government budgets? And so they have the fact that they have to spend all of their budget, and if they don't spend it all, then they lose that budget for next year. So at
No,
the
totally.
as they get close to the end, they're like, well, we have this extra budget we need to get through. Let's just buy cool shit.
Oh yeah,
Well, the good news is I think that's a bigger problem in the U.S. than it is in Canada, especially when you have programs where the federal government is saying you can lease an MRAP to a police department for like $50 a month.
Yeah.
when
What
I
police
mean,
department's like, you know what? I don't want an MRAP. We don't want the APC. Thanks, Obama.
Right.
well, yeah, and Homeland Security in the U.S. basically opened that up so that anyone can buy anything. Like
Yeah,
that
I mean, with
whole-
very little. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, there's very few exceptions to that rule, but basically any law enforcement in the states can buy any military equipment now, or
Yeah.
lease it from the federal government at a very, very reasonable rate.
yeah,
I think we're fortunate that we don't have that problem in Canada because our federal government's control of D&D resources includes things like not selling surplus D&D resources, because you
Yeah.
can't go and buy like a gently used armored personnel carrier.
because if you could, I would.
No, yeah, if I could, I would too, and I'm sure my local PD would do the same thing.
Yeah,
But they don't, because we have rules in this country that say you aren't allowed to do that, at least presently. We'll see if that continues or not. I do think that Marty brings up a good point. The whole zero-sum budget, you got to spend it thing is
which is
definitely
the
a problem.
stupidest thing ever
Yeah.
in my mind. Like that whole you got to spend it or you lose it. Well, maybe I don't need it this year, but next year I might need a little bit more than that. I mean that.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, you're not always okay. So we have like ongoing costs of upkeep. Everybody's got to get new uniforms. There's new boots. Occasionally, you have to buy somebody a new gun, right? But let's say all of our guns are 20 years old. Now we have to replace in Toronto 10,000 firearms, right? Because everybody's rocking like old Gen 2 Glocks.
Yeah,
Okay,
next
that
year you
year
don't
is
have to
going to
do
be
that.
a lot more expensive. But do we have to do that again next year? No, we don't have to do that again for another 10 or 15 years, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the thing. Like the whole zero-sum budgeting, use it or lose it, is a ridiculous way to budget for municipal police force. Actually, I take that back. For any level of police force.
Well,
For any level of government. I mean, there's no incentive to ever reduce your spending.
well, no, I mean,
It's every year you have to spend more than the year previous.
as a business owner, I mean, I deal with this year to year. And certain companies give us, spending allowances and this and that, and we have to use it or we lose it. So we do. But when I run my business, I don't have a policy like that. If I don't need to spend the money, I don't spend the money. If I need to, then I will. So I would rather have my budget kind of, ebb and flow as it needs to be. I always look at what I did last year to give myself a projection, but just saying, oh, well, I spent 10,000 this year, which means I need to spend 10,000 the next year or I won't get that money again is stupid. That's not a good business decision. Idiots do that.
These places don't run like businesses, though, because you need to have the justification for the continuation of the increased taxation of your citizens so that you can continue to operate whatever your government entity is.
And continue to rob your citizens because taxation is theft.
Taxation is theft. We haven't said that in a while.
The thing is, I mean, with the amount of deficit we have, you can keep making an argument for taxing. Like,
Yeah,
you don't
but we
need to
wouldn't
keep
have that.
taxing
We wouldn't
more.
have that deficit if we didn't spend it on stupid shit.
No, but we
Yeah.
have like at least like 50 years where we can just keep paying down the deficit and still justify taxation.
But that means that we need to stop overspending in order to be able to pay that off and justify it.
I agree, and part of that is municipal police forces not buying goddamn MRAPs.
Yeah.
unless they need it.
No, I actually am of the opinion that no police department anywhere north in America needs an MRAP. I can
Probably
see
not.
having armored vehicles for certain things for certain police forces.
Well, like I said, I mean, they could definitely have like a borrow program from, the military.
Yeah, but there's not a lot of military in Canada, and there's not a lot of easy access to that equipment.
No, but
Right? So, like, if you're in Toronto, where's your nearest lav? London? Meaford? Like, that's a bit of a commute. If you need it, you need it. But I don't think that having light armored vehicles is the right solution.
I don't think our army has that many of them around even.
they could totally deck out a couple of Escalades though with some bulletproof panels and shuttle those around the province pretty easy.
Well, I think that's actually what TPS does with their ERT team, is they actually have the bullet-resistant. I think they're Suburbans, not Escalades, but same difference.
Yeah. They're just not as gangsta. That's what it is.
All right. Are you guys ready to move on to the next thing?
Sure.
Great.
Yeah.
Pee break first?
Back to this topic.
Pee break first.
We need to get you a funnel.
I hope he doesn't edit this out.
Well, it's live, so whoever's tuning in right now, Andrew is peeing. Although, I guess given that it's live, maybe it's a good thing he doesn't have a funnel. Because that is definitely
the fact that it's on camera. I'm glad that he doesn't have a funnel.
Yeah, because we've definitely had to do that when we've recorded some of the Liberty or Death podcast stuff. There have been many a pee break. No, there's been many a pee break, but luckily that doesn't go out live and nobody uses their video. So, you just kind of go and take your leak and you're good to go. But
I mean, there's 3 people watching on the YouTube stream.
Only 3?
Only 3.
Well, that'll happen.
We appreciate every one of them.
It's true, but I can tell you that who one of them is right now. Because I just got a message from them saying that they better not edit this out.
Oh, the pee break?
Yeah. And I'm pretty sure they have good authority to make him not edit it out.
I have a suspicion as to who that could be then.
I don't want to, give away any trade secrets or anything, but they have some pretty good authority to make him keep that in. We should put on some really bad elevator music in the background if Andrew ever has to get up and go somewhere.
I think this is the first time he's done this.
No, he had to take a call one time, but this is the first time, at least during a live show.
But he didn't we didn't stop the podcast.
One time he lost a signal. He totally dropped out. And then we started talking about all kinds of nonsense. Yeah, this is the first time he's had to leave and take a pee. No, here he is.
I'm back and I brought more beer. I'm missing anything good?
No, we were just talking about other times when we've had to take some breaks because your internet dropped out or you had to take a call, and how on the Liberty or Death podcast when we've done it, there are definitely a lot of pee breaks, but luckily that doesn't go live.
Yeah, you know what though? I like that Tyler has scheduled intermissions.
Yeah. Although,
all right, guys, it's been 2 hours. Time to go.
I do know that somebody that's been on our show and that show has peed in a tub in their basement.
Yeah, I know that guy.
During this show.
All right, Marty's back, right? I haven't heard him.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, cool. All right, 2 more news articles before we wrap up the show. We'll leave the police stuff alone for a little while. We'll go into something else. Something that I find, I'm going to go ahead and say offensive. being offended isn't really a good answer, but this offensive is really the right word for these assholes.
You're allowed to be offended.
Yeah,
that's
but
about all you're entitled to. But
that's exactly it. You're allowed to be offended and nothing else. No one has to do anything else just because you're offended.
Yeah.
I'm not sure who these yahoos are, and I'm not going to be listening to their music in their future. But I guess there's a group called the Canadian Tenors.
Anyway.
Oh no, I'm pretty sure they are not nearly heavy metal enough for my taste. But
yeah,
the Canadian Tenors using a Major League Baseball game in Toronto to change the lyrics to "O Canada" to say that all lives matter. Thoughts?
The other three threw the one guy under the bus pretty quickly. That was pretty impressive.
I don't think that "O Canada" is acceptable to use to make any sort of political statement, whether I'm for or against that political statement.
Yeah, no, absolutely not the time or place.
Like, there's certain things that need to be sacred in this country, and given that there was such controversy over changing the lyrics recently, they really should have just left it alone. Like,
yeah.
Just.
So the one thing, and this is what I mentioned to Andrew as well when I first sent it to him, was like absolutely not the time or place. They should not have done this. But the outrage over changing the lyrics to a national anthem to satisfy a political agenda, we literally just did that.
Yeah.
We just changed the lyrics to our national anthem because of a political agenda.
Yep.
Which I'm still offended about, in case anyone at home is keeping score, because I don't feel the need to change the translation of French lyrics into English to be more gender inclusive.
Yeah. Well, and this is one thing. So I was talking with my father about this, and apparently, like, back in the 70s or whatever, like, this is a thing that's kind of gone around every now and again. And at that time, it wasn't about being gender neutral, but apparently our home and native land was offensive to some people that were not born in Canada but are Canadian citizens.
Oh, boo-hoo.
So there apparently back then there was a thing to try and change that to make it more inclusive, which again I think is nonsense. Like,
yeah,
our national anthem is our national anthem, and
there's a history and there's a heritage behind it.
Yeah.
Well, this is part of my problem with our current Liberal government. I'm sure I would have had the same problem had I been alive in the 70s to have a problem with the government at the time when they were trying to change it to not include our native land. We have a national identity. I like our national identity, or at least I like what I thought our national identity was until about 1965. Stop messing with things that are Canadian to be more inclusive for people who don't identify as Canadians.
Yeah. I mean, if you come here and you don't want to identify as Canadian, you can take off.
Exactly.
Like, I have no problem with people coming from other countries and cultures and everything. Both of my parents are from other countries. I totally respect people from other countries. I think they bring a diversity to our nation that makes it what it is and is awesome.
Oh yeah, don't take that as me saying I don't believe in like immigration or other people coming to Canada or like non-white people or anything like that. Well, for listeners' perspective too, because I mean you know me, and I like to think that you have a pretty good understanding of my views because we like spend time talking about that sort of thing. But I don't care where you're from or what color you are or what you like, what deity you decide to worship. But if you become a Canadian, if you come to Canada to be part of that national identity, the multicultural melting pot that is Canada, part of that is we are a nation of primarily immigrants. Primarily European immigrants, but immigrants. We mostly come from other places, and that makes Canada awesome because we get things like donair and kebabs and pizza and Chinese food. I don't have a good example for that.
Well, but exactly. I think that's what makes diversity and everybody coming together is what makes us
it's everybody
Canadian.
Coming together. It's the people that come to Canada that don't want to be Canadian, that want to bring whatever ideology, be it political or religious or whatever, that they had in their country of origin, and they come to Canada and they want Canada to be more like the place they came from.
Yeah, and there's
If you
nothing
want to
wrong.
come to Canada to be Canadian, that's what you do. If you want to come to Canada to change Canada, that you're wrong. You don't do that.
But I mean, I think that goes to like, if you want to come here and you want to incorporate your values into Canadian values, that's one thing. But if you want to go to anywhere and turn it into where you came from, I don't care what country you're from and where you're going, you're leaving where you're from and going to somewhere else for a reason, and you should respect that. Like, and that, you know, don't try to change the place you're going to. If it was so awesome where you're from, stay there, wherever that is.
Well, exactly, and that's
So, you know, of course, you know, societies, cultures, they evolve, and the lyrics of an anthem may not, you know, if people deem that it doesn't reflect sort of our society today, that's still not a valid reason to change it, because, you know, the lyrics of the anthem reflect sort of the history in the past and sort of the path that we took to get to where we are today. And even if it is, let's say if there was things in there that you know kind of went against what we believe today, I still think it's valid to have those lyrics. And you know, it is you know, if you don't, by honoring the path, by honoring the past, by reflecting on the past, you know, that's how you evaluate the kind of the changes that our society has made. If you just, you know, rewrite history so that everything is the same as today, then there's no lesson to be learned in history.
No, I agree. And I mean, if it gets to the point where our anthem totally does not fit our culture and society anymore, then let's vote on it as a nation.
Yeah.
Something else, right? Like,
yeah, that's a whole topic that we could have, but I would prefer everything as a referendum.
But yeah, like if you're going to do something like that affects national identity and our national culture and everything, then I have no problem changing it, but let's vote on it. Let's not just get the government to go, yeah, we're changing this because. Like that's ridiculous.
Well, I don't even want to have a vote on it. I want to have a referendum where there has to be a significant majority. Like, in order to like change part of our national identity or our cultural heritage as Canadians, if you can't get like, I don't know, arbitrary number, 80% of people to agree, then it doesn't happen.
No, I agree with that completely. Like if all of a sudden they wanted to change it so that it's not, you know, a maple leaf or a beaver or a Canada goose or something, right? Like, fine, if you want to change it, but let's all get together on this and make sure that we're all on board, or at least the vast majority of us are on board, because that's what makes us a nation. So we all have a say.
I'm gonna steal a quote from one of our YouTube commenters here. It all comes down to force and wanting to change society to fit your opinion. I think that's well put.
Well, you should at least give a shout out to Walper Staw for saying that.
Yeah. As our mostly lone YouTube commenter.
Yeah.
No, there are 2 or 3 people on the YouTube this evening.
Yeah. There was a couple of good ones earlier too that I won't repeat.
Yeah, Brian Allen, we know you're there.
Yeah,
we're
that'll
not
be the
saying
one.
any of those things. Yeah.
But I
we're
believe
not ignoring you. We're just not repeating any of those things because I would have to edit them all out. Yeah. Time and place. This is a Major League Baseball game is neither the time or the place to push your political agenda. Stop messing with my national anthem. Like,
yeah.
Well, I have no problem with it happening at a baseball game. I have a problem with it happening during our national anthem. I mean, baseball is baseball. Like whatever, I don't care.
You're right. It wouldn't matter what the venue was. Stop messing with my national anthem.
Yeah, I mean, there is a time and place for everything, and there's certain things I can respect. Like, I don't have to always just agree with it, but like certain movements feel like they need to make themselves known. I can respect that. You know, I don't have to agree with it, but I can respect that they feel they need to make themselves known. I can think that it's a stupid time and place. But national anthem. It's that simple.
So let me ask you guys this. Now, we would have been having the same conversation, but what do you think the media reaction would have been if you'd held up a sign that said Black Lives Matter?
Nobody would have cared. They would have thought it was great.
No, I disagree. It would not have been that nobody cared. The media would have gone ape for that. They would have thought it was amazing that someone had the
Well,
courage.
yeah. By what I mean by
Quotes,
nobody
courage.
cares is that nobody would have got offended. Sorry.
Yes. Like, I would still be here having this conversation saying not the time or the place. Like,
Yeah.
I think we would still be having this conversation, but we would be the minority.
Well, we're already the minority.
We did that when we
People that
discussed
think
their actions during Pride Parade. I don't think that was the time or place. Like, I can respect that they have an opinion and that they needed to make themselves known. I can respect that.
Yeah.
But I think it was still the wrong time and place. And, I mean, I certainly have issues with that movement. And I certainly don't have anything against black people, and I certainly do think that there is racism that exists today that maybe needs to get looked at. But I have huge problems with that movement based on its origins and the people that are involved with it, and a whole bunch of other stuff that I won't get into. But
yeah, there's a conspiracy theory rabbit hole you can go down with Black Lives
Yeah.
Matter.
Yeah,
we should have that. We should have that episode because
and
I'm
I
gonna edit
don't.
this out for the later. But
And I certainly don't want anyone to think that I have problems with people that are not white, because I don't, and I think that everyone should be equal, but I have problems with that movement in particular based on its origins and what it does and doesn't do.
if any other group of people did that, they would be labeled a terrorist organization.
I mean, I really can't stand how they're not denouncing the acts of violence towards police that is happening right now. You know, they're not...
I agree with you, Andrew. The fact that they haven't been, labeled as a domestic terror organization, they've full out called for violence against America, violence against its citizenry. The fact that they are, having meetings with the president is just absolutely disgusting. The fact that presidential candidates.
Never mind in America. Let's bring this to Canada. We had an event in Toronto this past week. This isn't in the show notes. I'll have to find an article and link it later if I leave this in. The Mayor Tory and Kathleen Wynne, the Premier of Ontario, had a meeting with the leaders of Black Lives Matter Toronto to address some of their grievances.
Yeah.
If any other group got up and said we should shoot cops and then sat down with the Premier, I take that back. There would be no way that the Premier would have a meeting with those people.
Well, and that's my problem with the whole movement, and I certainly do think that some of the things they say have some merit, but as soon as you stop, as soon as they go along with the other stuff and are not denouncing people doing crappy things in their name, then they're sanctioning that. If they got up and said, look, we don't like cops, but we certainly don't want you to go out and kill them because we think that's wrong, because violence is violence is violence, and that's wrong, I could at least somewhat get behind it.
Yeah, once you start calling for violence, start calling for killing citizens, that's when I stopped listening to your point of view.
Well, and for anyone that doesn't know, I'll just get into it quickly, but the sort of spiritual background of this particular organization is a militant woman who was part of the Black Panthers and then the BLA, who is a convicted cop killer. That is their spiritual leader and, inspiration. You can check that fact. You can research it all you want. That's true. And so that's why you're getting a lot of this anti-cop sentiment that goes along with it, and they're not saying no to any of that. But, that's all, American history, and you guys can read up on that because we're talking about Canadian stuff, but that's my rant.
Yeah, it's just sad that it's spilling over into Canada.
Well, they are our largest, they're really our only bordering neighbor and our largest trading partner, so it makes sense that what happens there affects us. I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of discussing American politics.
Yeah, because that's a whole other
that's like the
altogether.
angry Canadian podcast.
Which we might have to start doing as a spin-off.
Dear. Okay.
Isn't that just the Liberty or Death podcast?
Well, that's got an American on it, so it's international. We could just have a whole just Canadians only complaining about stuff that's going on in the States that's affecting life in Canada.
That should be a pretty fun podcast to do.
I agree.
All right, Marty, you're in charge of founding that and doing the editing.
So guess that's never gonna happen.
All right. Last news article of this evening is a follow-up to last week's episode. We talked about a teacher from the Toronto area that was at a pro-Palestinian rally. This week, coming to us from the CBC, we have the school board investigating Mississauga teacher after speech at pro-Palestinian rally. Basically, there's nothing in the story other than the school board is investigating what she was doing and where she was and whether or not she actually said inflammatory or hateful things. But hey, follow up to last week, I guess somebody was listening to us because now the school board's investigating a teacher.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess that's good. As someone from Mississauga, that kind of makes me worry. But did it say what school or anything?
Yes, she works for the Dufferin Peel Catholic District School Board, and I believe she teaches at St. Catherine de Sinai, separate school in Mississauga.
I have no idea where that one is. I was not part of the Catholic school board, but I don't think I even know anyone that went there. But hey, if people be fronting terrorism one way or the other, I think they should be looked at.
Yeah, we talked about my views on this last week. I don't think this woman should be in a position where she's teaching because she clearly cannot separate her political beliefs from the rest of her life.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
All right, awkward silence to cut out later. Let's do rapid fire feedback. Coming to us from iTunes, we have Jonesy ATPL. His review is titled, "Always a solidly back and well-versed show, 5 stars."
Thank you. We try.
You
A
must
great podcast.
edit a lot if that's the feedback you're getting.
I do edit significantly.
It's basically the
In fact,
really
this whole
shitty
thing
intro.
right now where you're interrupting me reading the fucking review is getting edited out. A great podcast backed up by facts and not emotions. The fight is uphill, but you guys are consistent in both message and logic. Thanks for helping me not feel alone in my libertarian views. I thought I was the only sane one left out there. Smiley face. And now we can discuss the feedback that we've read.
You're not the only sane one, but you are a minority.
Yeah, my guess, if I had to quantify how many Canadians would agree with our general sentiments and point of view, is somewhere under 3%. I would be shocked and appalled if it was higher than that.
Well, all you need is 3% of the population to overthrow the government. I'm just saying.
Yeah, there's almost a reason why I picked that number.
I'm not that I'm advocating for it. I'm just saying.
Oh, no, I'm straight up advocating for it at this point.
Is there a thirsty tree up in Canada as well?
There ought to be if there isn't.
There's some thirsty panelists, that's for sure.
There are some thirsty panelists. I got to drink a lot when we do this. So we want to thank Jonesy ATPL for his feedback on the iTunes. He did leave a 5-star review, but he neglected to follow an important step. You have to choose something for Gavin to drink within reason.
Yeah.
So no Bear Grylls nonsense. But if you want to pick some alcohol,
yeah, shoot us an email at feedback@CanadianPatriotPodcast.com, or find us on somewhere.
If you want to get in touch with the show, you can do that at facebook.com/CanadianPatriotPodcast or by visiting CanadianPatriotPodcast.com/feedback. Remember, I love your hate mail. I haven't gotten any hate mail recently. I'm a little bit upset about that, so if you'd like to tell me how much you hate me, or hate my podcast, or hate the people that do my podcast with me, or how I've generally offended your delicate sensibilities, you can do that by emailing the show directly at feedback@CanadianPatriotPodcast.com. Gavin, where's the best place for people to stay in touch with you?
You can find me on the Instagrams at urbex_GTA.
I know this is a silly question. Marty, do you believe in social media?
There's no reason to ask it.
Marty does not believe in social media. Marty does not have any sort of public persona. Marty is essentially a ghost.
running those ghost guns out of California,
Someone's got to make a buck.
eh?
They can't even wait. They can't even have bullet buttons anymore now. Is that what I saw?
Yeah,
No,
I was.
well, yeah, but they fixed it. The company that manufactured the bullet button made a new version of the bullet button where you now
Yeah,
release the rear takedown pin of the AR, and then it's a bullet button again.
yeah. They've got like a little thing that you pull out at the back, and then yeah, it pulls your bolt pin out that then drops the mag. I was actually one of the guys I was out with on the weekend is from California or California.
So basically you can still shoot an AR, but it becomes even more awkward because you can't.
Yeah, you have to
change.
split. You have to split
Becomes
the.
marginally more awkward than the bullet button, but the
Okay.
fix to get around the law in California came out like 2 days after the law was released because the company that makes the bullet button was like, "Hey, we got a thing for this. Just put it in production, guys."
It's like they already had that.
Oh, you know they already had that because
Just
you
in
know they
case.
knew the legislation was coming,
yeah,
right? So they
so-
had months to R&D that shit.
The first thing that guy did when he got into Utah was pull out his kit and take out his bullet button and put in a proper mag release. And then he has his 30-round mags that he keeps as a shell and then the spring. And as soon as he got there again, pop the spring in and then good to go.
Okay, before I do my closeout, we have to recognize one of our YouTube contributors. Walper Style says that his name is James Walter. Son of a bitch, I have to edit this out. His name is James Walper, Libertarian Party of Canada. He's only caught 2 of the podcasts live, but right on board with what we're saying. Right on board with most of what we're saying. P.S. Drink strawberry daiquiris. So, James, important note. In order to get Gavin to drink a strawberry daiquiri, you need to leave us a 5-star review on iTunes. It's very important that there's a 5-star review on iTunes because it helps more people find the show. As an incentive for installing the piece of crap software called iTunes, that's what you get to select Gavin's drink for.
But I
So
will
that's-
gladly drink strawberry daiquiris for that. And as
I
a
bet you
card-carrying member of the Libertarian Party, thank you
Wouldn't-
for everything that you do.
Wouldn't people have to create iTunes accounts for that then?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes,
that's not
it's-
worth it.
No, it's worth it. Go ahead, make an iTunes account.
Do it.
You can disable all the notifications, and after you leave a 5-star review, you can uninstall it.
Yeah. And then you can choose what I drink.
And then you.
But then
can-
Apple knows about you. You don't want to do that.
They already know about you.
It's fine. You probably have Pokemon Go. Just go ahead and install it anyway. It's not like the NSA is wiretapping everything you do.
Yeah. I mean, Apple is stronger than the FBI. They said no to those bastards. And got away with it.
As always, my name is Andrew. You can find all my work on everydaytactical.com or Instagram and Twitter at edtactcool. If you want to check out the show, we're on Facebook, facebook.com/Canadian Patriot Podcast, or we have this website thing, CanadianPatriotPodcast.com. Remember, if you want to leave us hate mail, that's feedback at CanadianPatriotPodcast.com. Like we do every week, we'd like to remind our listeners that you are the true North, strong and free.